Hi, tourpreneurs, and welcome back to another episode of the Tourpreneur Travel Visits Podcast. I am Mitch Bach. I'm here with my partners in crime, Peter Simon Gutierrez, and we are joined today by Anna Cashman, who is the head of brand Get Your Guide, and she is here to talk about a blockbuster new report that has just been launched by Get Your Guide on the ever interesting topic of reviews. Anna, welcome to Tourpreneur. It's really great to finally have you on the air.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here to talk about reviews. Increasingly important, I would say.
It looks like you've aggregated 3.1 million reviews. Can you talk to me about what your methodology was in putting together this report?
Yeah, for sure. So the most important thing to note with this report is that we looked at reviews with comments. And the reason that we did that was because it's impossible to analyze reviews without context, right? And so when we dive deep into sentiment in particular, we want to really understand the themes and topics that are being surfaced across different categories and for different nationalities. And so comments play a really, really important role there. So for the reviews in 2024, so we didn't go too far back. The reason being, we also wanted some kind of recency, and we know that there are slightly so trends change over time. So we looked at reviews with comments in 2024. In addition to that, we also looked at platform data, right? So we sort of layered the review data, so the instances of reviews, the star rating with product performance. So in short, how well does a product do when it has X number of reviews? What happens when the review number grows? How does performance change if the rating improves or gets worse? And then finally, we also looked at some third-party data. We do this because we want to basically validate our claims, right? We have reams and reams of data that we can look at that's statistically significant. But, one thing to also keep in mind is that this is primarily the reviews of Get Your Guide data. And so we want to look to external sources to make sure that we're not, off the mark. And then the other thing we also took a look at was qual research. So our UX research or qualitative research. So our UX team, they do lots of research all the time on customer behavior. And a big thing that they often focus on is reviews, what people look for in reviews, how they use them, what's important to them when looking at reviews. And so we sort of tried to weave this in to tell a comprehensive story.
What surprised you about your findings? Was there anything that you looked at and said, I wasn't expecting that?
So, a bit of a disclaimer, I obviously look at this stuff a lot. So I suppose the bar to surprise me is high. But one thing that I didn't expect to see to this degree was just how important or critical even reviews are. The reality is that reviews have been important for a long time. We know that everyone looks at reviews when they're making purchasing decisions. But this is especially true of the experiences industry. And when you sort of start to dig into that, it makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because experiences are a thing that you can buy once, but you can't do second try. You've got one chance to get it right. You're in a destination for a really limited period of time, and it's critical that you're making the right choice in the right moment. The only other industry or vertical for which it was reviews were equally important were electronics and white goods. And that also makes sense to me, right? Really, really high purchase, high price items. When was the last time you bought and then returned a washing machine or a laptop, right? Doesn't happen. And so, customers look to reviews to help make really, really confident purchasing decisions. The other thing that I found really interesting was that reviews are basically equally as trustworthy for consumers as what personal recommendations are. I found that fascinating. So people now, 91% of people trust reviews as much as personal recommendations, which I think is just, frankly, bananas, and maybe suggests that our friends have poor taste.
Does that say more about the quality of Get Your Guide reviews or about the nature of human friendships today?
So I think my interpretation of that is that when not all reviews are created equal, right? And there are probably some platforms where we trust reviews more than others. And I think if you are looking on a marketplace or in a space where like you trust the brand, you understand the type of customer that they're trying to target, and you have an affinity with their target audience, then the types of reviews that you're reading, if it comes from a particular group of people that you aspire to be, or that you feel that you could, whose recommendations you can trust, then I think those reviews are more are probably more watertight for you than other ones. I think it would be different if you were maybe on a platform where the reviews aren't verified, and from a group of people who you don't necessarily associate yourself with. So maybe like if I'm looking for something on Amazon, where the reviews aren't necessarily verified and can be deleted easily, and I'm looking for a product that I don't particularly have like a vested interest in or emotional connection to, then maybe I would trust them less.
Yeah, no, talking about surprises, when I read through the report, there was a couple of things, and again, just having my marketing head on, that really stood out to me, because we always sort of push and we always try to advise operators to sort of say, try to get the review from the person as quickly as possible. You're normally in person, etc. But your report actually showed the email was driving a lot more reviews rather than being in person and stuff like that. And the other one, it really surprised me, which is for any tour operator who's not really got too many reviews out there, they should really start thinking about it, that only 10 reviews saw a 4 times increase in conversions. Which is I found fascinating. I found that it's a really low amount of reviews created that many more conversions.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you brought up the first point. I think because I had an operator reach out to me last week asking about this particular point. They're like, well, normally, we have guides, and so we encourage our guides to ask people for reviews on the spot, and that's how we get 90% of our reviews. I would say if that's a tactic that works for you and you have the opportunity to do that, because not all operators or not all experiences do, then you should do it, right? There's no reason, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There are, and I think this is also really important to take this type of research with a grain of salt, because what we do is we aggregate when we ask those types of questions, when we solicit information from customers in this way. So how do you prefer to receive reviews? We don't ask them specifically, how would you prefer to receive a review for an attraction versus for a day trip versus for a 2-hour walking tour versus. And I think there we will probably find that people's preferences change a little bit. I would say that if an operator or if an activity does have a guide and you can have this human call to action, then that would be a missed opportunity to not ask on the spot, right? Mm-hmm. But it also doesn't mean that you should forego sending that email reminder. There are also some types of experiences that I think lend themselves more to waiting a little bit. So imagine if you are like you have an adventure activity and you've just gone out for like a 3-hour whitewater kayak or whitewater rafting thing, and you come back and you're exhausted and you're wet and all you want to do is get into dry clothes and have a beer, right? Then I would say is probably not the moment to be like, hey, let's all sit down and write a review now, right? So I think context is really, really important. And then also for an attraction or for an activity that isn't guided, that's also a moment where you need to send a review 3 days after. But again, at the moment, at the exit of a venue with a person, like with an iPad or whatever, do it, try it. Why not? No reason not to. But I think context matters. Too long didn't read. And then the second point you raised, how critical it is to have the first 10 reviews. Honestly, it was a bit of a business problem that I wanted to address, right? Many operators don't know how critical the first 10 reviews are. They can make or break a product, frankly. And you're right. I mean, it's only 10, but it's 10 relative to 0. And so what's important here too is that obviously there's a bit of a bell curve, right? So the more reviews you have, like every incremental review, if you have 1,788 reviews, 1,798 reviews is not going to make a huge difference to your conversion, right?
People will only tend to look at the first 10 or whatever, the latest 10 or
Exactly.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's about so it's understanding that the critical time period of like 0 to 10 is going to be much, much more impactful than your incremental 10 on, 2,000 reviews, for example. The reason why it impacts it so much is because reviews basically feed algorithms. They feed algorithms across the internet, on our marketplace, for sure. It's a really big factor. It's not the only factor, but it's an important one. But also like AI searches and stuff, they also draw on reviews, right? So it's about visibility in the end. The more reviews you have, the more visible you are, the more eyeballs in your product, the more opportunity to convert. And once you have reviews, basically you're sending a message that your product's legit, right? And so there's less of a barrier to consideration or to purchase.
So the thing I see least used with reviews with operators, and it drives me insane, is operators who have really good reviews and have been around for a while and it's got age and they've got a lot of reviews and most of them are 5-star. Mm-hmm. They're not correlating the power of the reviews with their pricing, because operators who are sitting at the top of a review tree in any vertical should be using the power of those reviews to price at a different level from their competition, where there doesn't seem to be this connection with great reviews and pricing. And there is a connection between great reviews and pricing.
Yeah. What's the question?
Is GetYourGuide doing anything with all of this research and all of this knowledge that you see if you've got outstanding performers from a review point of view, because the algorithm's going to push them to the top because there's so much weight placed on reviews? Like the automatic thing there is like, something should be pinging out to the operator saying, address your pricing up the way because it's in all their benefits.
Yeah. So, fully agree. And I think that, because experiences are a thing that you can only, you've got one shot at, you want to make sure that you are buying the best possible version of the thing that you want to do. And so you're going to be okay paying a little bit more for an exceptional experience, right? Value-based pricing makes a lot of sense. GetYourGuide is not necessarily in the business of instructing what prices operators should pay. That's obviously their prerogative. It always will be. I would encourage operators to look at where they sit in terms of rankings and how they are faring compared to their competitors and adjust their pricing based on that. I would also play a little bit as a devil's advocate here and say that if you have, let's use the number 2,000 because it's in my head now, but if you have 2,000, 2,000 reviews and you've got an average rating of 4.7 stars, let's say, but none of the reviews have a description, or none of the reviews or very few of the reviews are recent, then I would say that price elasticity, I think, takes a bit of a blow. So there are other factors that you need to consider to make sure that you have that you look robust when it comes to a customer making a decision between you and a competitor. I also think too that the challenge here is to find that price, and you would know more about this than me, honestly, Pete, but is to find that price, especially if you're not communicating well your USP or the thing that stands out or the thing that the customer can get with you and no one else, then a potential traveler or a customer might feel like they've paid too much if they don't understand or if you don't well communicate the thing that they're getting that's different to everyone else. And I think this is one of the challenges that actually another operator emailed me about recently. He's like, yeah, one of the biggest pieces of feedback we get is value for money. We've got an average of 4.8 stars. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of reviews. But the biggest piece of feedback we get is always about value for money. And now I haven't done that particular tour, but the advice that I give is I would dog food the product, right? Make sure that you go through and that you're doing your own product and you understand what the peak moments are. And on those peak moments, make it really, really clear that it's unique to you. And then find a way to actually communicate the value that you're giving on the tour so people understand what they've paid for. Don't leave it to chance, in other words. I think you need to be really, really mindful and really measured to make sure that people get what they're paying for, right?
If you're getting consistent feedback that says value for money, to me that is a sign that my prices are too low.
Oh,
it's great that people feel they're getting great value for money, but that normally from a human, if I'm saying to somebody this is fantastic value for money, I'm thinking I would have paid more for it.
Oh, well, I see.
It's interesting you mention peak moments because that's kind of one of the two things that I talk about endlessly. The idea that in a fantastically designed experience, you can create a standout moment that becomes essentially what somebody remembers about the whole experience, that it becomes what their memory latches onto. And therefore, when they go to review, they feel a natural motivation to leave a review because of that peak experience. But also that peak experience allows you to sort of cover up a lot of other things that might go wrong. Because ultimately, they're not reviewing, except maybe if you're a certain kind of individual, very type A, you're not taking notes on every aspect of the tour and you're not reviewing it, you're reviewing it emotionally. And so I've always found that having that peak experience, that is a unique wow moment that stands out above the rest of the tour is important. Please tell me there's some data that backs up what I've been talking about for the last decade.
There are insights that surface in the data. At no point, there's no one particular data point that you can look at that says, having a specific peak moment will help you in the long run. There are a number of things that you can look at. Then, when combined, we can make this assertion. Of all of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reviews that I read for this report across all possible categories for tours and experiences in almost every continent, not once did I read the tour guide was on time. I waited less than 20 minutes in the line. The audio guide worked without a problem. And, the toilets were really clean. Spectacular experience, would do again. Like, this is not the thing that people are talking about. On the other hand, when it comes to negative reviews, it's about complaints, right? But complaints and delight live in very, very different camps. I was a theatre kid at school, in case you couldn't tell. I remember I had one theatre teacher, one drama teacher, who was like, you don't get points for learning your lines, right? And I think that's the same here. You don't get points for being on time. You don't get points for making sure the audio guide works. You don't get points for making sure that it's well signposted and, that your toilet's cleaned well, because they're things that people expect. And if they're not done, then, and in the same way that if I were to go and see a theatre performance and the actors didn't know their lines, I would probably mention that in a review. But to mention something that is truly amazing, you need to give people a visceral reaction. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be delighted, 100% of the time, but you just need a moment that people can latch onto to then talk about. I think the other thing that comes out in the data is that people leave the types of activities that people leave the reviews for with positive comments the most are guided. They have a person there. What do you have when you have a person there? You've got storytelling. You've got connection. You have some kind or some aspect of personalization. And it doesn't need to be bespoke to every single person there, but you have someone with whom to interact and who can also ultimately fix issues when they come up or show sympathy if there are problems. And so I think there's these two data points, like the fact that no one leaves an emphatic review about things just working as they should, and the fact that the most reviews with description, emphatic reviews with descriptions, are left when people have an opportunity to hear stories and connect with someone, I think suggests that, yes, you need to build in these peak moments. And I think here peak moment means the key word for me is connection, because that's what ultimately people are looking for. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm very, very proud of the tourpreneur segment, which is often the companies that are offering guided, personalized, maybe similar experiences. And I'm extremely proud of tourpreneurs when I look at the spread of overall customer satisfaction by category, because I am looking at one heck of a differential between the top of your list, which are workshops, walking tours, adventure tours, multi-day trips. This makes absolute sense. The thrill of a national park, the idea of spending multiple days with a group and bonding, the intimacy of a walking tour. So all of those received like above a 70, which means like a quarter of the people taken it. That's amazing. At the lowest level, Christian Watts, if you're listening, at a at a -6 is hop on, hop off buses. In the teens are things like museums and historical sites, observation decks, theme parks, entrance tickets, ticketed attractions, zoos, aquariums. Turns out everyone's annoyed by them, and yet like they sell endless amounts. What's your read on that?
Yeah. So I think first, important to remember that the positive negative sentiment here, so net sentiment is essentially positive mentions minus negative mentions, yeah? And this is, again, just for reviews with comments. So these categories across the board are highly rated overall, but when you isolate just the comments, what do they say? And again, why did I choose to do that? Because I think going forward, rich reviews are going to be infinitely more important than just single star reviews, because they show that they come from a real person, because they can be verified, because people understand exactly what why or why not they should book something. And so this is why we focused on them. The other thing that I will mention too is that in the middle, so museums and galleries, for example, they might also be covered in guided attraction tours, right? So galleries themselves may have amazing positive reviews, but particularly when they are done with like a guided tour. Now, what do I take into the sort of the bottom of the bottom of the graph here? I think so we know that negative reviews are often like complaints about logistics and value for money. And if you don't have someone showing you around, then logistics, there's a lot of room to go wrong, right? So when we look at galleries and museums, it's a lot about crowds and skip the line that isn't actually skip the line, or people have to wait too long in a technical skip the line queue, and they find that when they get there, the normal queue is shorter, or it's not particularly well signposted, or the audio guides that they bought on site didn't work properly, right? In terms of right at the very bottom, so we've got hop on hop off buses. Here again, I think there I wonder how many hop on, hop off buses are investing in those truly peak moments to overcome maybe some of the logistical challenges that are inherent to the hop on, hop off bus category. Like finding meeting spots are always going to be a challenge. Making sure that the bus comes on time with traffic is always going to be a challenge. Making sure that it's easy for the driver to understand what ticket you have, especially if it's like a full day pass, that's always going to be a challenge. So in the face of all of these logistical challenges, what are the moments where people are really like enjoying or having this moment of true delight and surprise? Especially if there's a flux of people sort of getting on and off a bus, by nature, that's what hop on, hop off buses are. Actually, I did another study just as a segue, sorry, a couple of years ago, and we found that hop on, hop off buses should be more aptly called hop on, stay on, because people tend to hop on, do the round, and then get off. Anyway, but in the case that they don't, then how do you build in a moment of surprise when you don't know if that person's going to be there the next stop, right? And so I think that probably explains why they receive a higher proportion of negative sentiment comments, because it's hard to overcome the logistics.
I have another theory. I don't know if this is fact or not, but think of McDonald's. It's not the best restaurant in the world, but it does the job. Right? And it does the job for millions and millions of people every day. It just does the job. So people, when they go into it, they don't have over expectations. It just does the job. I treat hop on, hop off exactly the same as McDonald's. It is just a commodity that does the job, and it's okay. But then the industry will chase everybody for reviews. If everybody who went through McDonald's got chased for a review, I bet you their reviews would be a lot less as well. There's certain products that humans just treat as we have this expectation of that product versus a different type of tour, which will be a once in a lifetime. They've never done it before. They have a very different expectation of that tour than when they've gone on a hop off bus that they may have already done in Madrid, Berlin, Paris. So it's just a different type of product that has a different level of expectation from the customer at the beginning of the journey. That's a theory. I have no data to prove that correct or not.
But when I use that, maybe go anywhere with the family, especially because we've got 2 children, we tend to go on a hop on, hop off bus just to get our bearings around a city, for example, just to sort of see where everything is and stuff like that. Then we know how far we need to walk to go to places and stuff. But the experience of actually getting, I actually find the word hop on, hop off a bit of an oxymoron, because you try to get onto the bus, and I remember this happening in Barcelona. You try to get onto the bus and they go, no, you need to walk a mile to the actual office, even though you've got a ticket to get something stamped or whatever it was, to then get on the bus and do it. So the whole experience of hop on, hop off tends to be pretty terrible anyway. But the actual, I'm with you, Pete, the actual experience in terms of just finding your bearings, that's what people use it for. They don't use it to get anything out of it other than knowing where things are. That's basically what a hop on, hop off. That's in my opinion. That's how I use it anyway.
So I have a hot take. It's a very hot take. I actually love a hop on, hop off bus for the reason that you've just said. So I would always do it at the beginning of a trip. It would never be a last day activity for me, and it is to get an orientation. But there was one. I remember, and I changed my opinion after I did one in Potsdam. I was with a family member. He is now 90 years old, right? So hop on, hop off bus for us was perfect. The commentary, it was an audio guide, but it was live commentary, but it was, I don't know if it meant to be hysterical, but it was absolutely hysterical. And I think that for me just gave me this new perspective of Potsdam. So I live in Berlin, right? Potsdam's not too far away. I've been there a few times. But having this truly, truly hysterical commentary, it was this banter between a German woman and a German man with heavily accented German English, which I don't know if it was on purpose, but if it was, it's just genius. And I think it's just it's a different type of product. It's not for the, intrepid adventurer, but that's okay, right? Not everything has to be. Do I think that there's lots of room to sort of reinterpret what a hop on, hop off bus could be? Sure. But I think, like, Pete, Chris, you're right. It's a product with very clear expectations, and you're taking it very, very, very specific reason. Not to say, though, that you couldn't add a peak moment or moments of delight.
I professionally take tours. I've taken hop on, hop off bus tours in every city that I can possibly go to. Dozens upon dozens upon dozens. I would say 99.9% of the audio tours are just 1972. The king of it's just they're not even trying it. Like that banter. That banter was for Germans. Imagine it. You could have a whole theater of imaginary characters in your ear. The live stories of some guy that runs a bodega or driving by. It's told to you as you're driving by. The technology is there to trigger that stuff. You could make it immersive and interesting and also very personalized if they cared about the technology. Instead, you're given a headphone that can barely be used and plugged into.
Not to ever work.
Yeah, half the time they don't work, and when they do work, you turn it off, and I watch people just completely disengage.
Mm.
Live guides, I see really good live guides deliver a unique bespoke experience, and people stay on because they wanna watch the show, and sadly, they're going away, and in New York, they're all oversold, so I see crowds for an hour and a half during high season waiting to get on, so I think they could just do better as a category, and I'm not alone, apparently. So, let's move along, though, to guides. So many of our audience have guides. What should they be making sure their guides are doing to ensure great reviews? What are some of the like real big pros that are standing out? And then what are some of the cons to be avoided?
I think, honestly, the data says what you would expect, right? The guide was knowledgeable. The guide was personable. The guide helped me understand the place in a new way. They made sure that everyone felt included. The pacing was really good. So, I mean, these are all things that any good guide should know and should do. I think, frankly, like it's harder said than done, but it's also not rocket science in terms of what people are really thinking about and complementing. The things that they love less, it's when when it feels a little bit, so this is my word, but this is what I interpret, when it feels a little bit scripted, too scripted, right? When you feel like the information, it was like a bit too superficial. It didn't, give me anything that I couldn't have found out alone. And then a lot about sort of communication quality and clarity. So for some cohorts, like accent and fluency came up. They spoke, to us with their back to us, so we couldn't hear properly. I mean, this is just, I suppose, I've never run a guide, but I feel like this is guiding 101, like make sure that people can hear you.
Did you think about ranking the reviews by country and destination?
We have done a little bit of that. We looked at it by the country that leaves the most reviews with descriptions overall. Germans actually do this. Now, look, I think too here, people in my company, actually, they're like, well, is that just because, GetYourGuide is a German-based company? I think no, it's not, because we have customers from all over the world. In fact, the US is as large a source market as what Germany is. But from living in Germany for 15 years, I know that Germans love to give their opinion. So this wasn't surprising for me. What was surprising was that Americans leave the fewest reviews with comments. Found that really interesting.
Especially a culture that's so big on their customer service and everything else, the tipping and things like you'd think they would be quite high up the list, but I found that surprising as well.
Yeah, very.
There's an obvious correlation with, if you take countries and then you could drill it down to cities. If I was the DMO, the national DMO, I would be interested in the quality overall that our country is providing versus other countries on a ranking system.
Yep.
Because if there's a weakness of the operator base in a city or a country as a whole, you want to know about that versus other countries. So again, a ranking system between countries, I think, would be quite entertaining. but it's also very useful because you want to make sure you're performing it. I mean, we're in a global industry. Country X is competing with country Y for traffic on the ground and giving them the best experience. So you actually want to know where people sit in rankings from a country and drilling down to a city destination. I think it's a useful piece of data for people to take action on.
You're right. I did not look at the average ratings of all tours, experiences, and activities per country. But that's something that I could do and maybe.
I tell you, Scotland wins anyway. Scotland will be it.
We did look though at the highest proportion of 5-star reviews amongst different source markets. No surprises, Canada was the highest, the nicest people.
The meanest one surprised me.
Yeah. So, I mean, mean, that's your word, not mine, but yeah, the Spaniards and the French were most likely to leave, had the highest proportion of negative reviews. Not the most likely to leave the negative reviews because that's about volume, but proportionally overall, they had the highest percentage of negative reviews versus all of the reviews that they submitted. And what's also interesting is that they complain about different stuff, right? So the Spain, I found this really interesting. One of their top gripes was guide timeliness for the Spaniards. Famously, the most on-time people.
Welcome to Cultural Stereotypes Hour, being proven true. Yeah, that is fascinating. Maybe they're like, if I'm here and I'm 20 minutes late, and then I can't believe the guide isn't here.
Maybe. And then another one for both Spanish and French source market was language, right? And I think, English is the default, so it makes sense, for example, that maybe American customers had less of an issue with language because it's probably the most accessible language that you can find within the tour space. Not so much for Spaniards or French, for example. But I think it's like a really interesting way to look at the data and just be like, okay, like where am I under indexing, or what cohorts of people can I do better for or do better with, and then try to find strategies based on their feedback.
Yeah, as a guide trainer, I think there are training solutions to make sure that you're dealing with multilinguistic groups in a way that is respectful to everybody. And that has to come down to the styles and manners in which you communicate, the varieties of ways you engage with your guests. So it isn't just this fast-talking Broadway actor in New York City who's really dynamic and really hilarious, and a third of the group has essentially no understanding of what just happened. And the answer isn't only to speak quiet or slowly in simple sentences. You can also make sure that they're doing interactive things that don't require language. It's an accessibility thing too. But I see this all the time, and it does surprise me because when I'm watching sometimes even guides that are just reading scripts, I'm like, I can't believe you're just saying this because nobody in this audience understands the terms you're using.
Maybe just a question for you guys. How much do you think that, speaking of tours in particular, the content of a tour should change depending on the cohort of the people you're guiding? And the reason why I asked the question is because I recently did a tour in Greece, in Athens. And I have a Greek background. I go to Greece all the time. And I was with some people who also have been to Greece a lot. And I think for me, it was important that the tour acknowledge that, right? So they're talking to a group of people who have maybe more profound or deeper already, like a foundational understanding of the city. And I wonder if you would like consider that if you were with, a group of people who were very brand new to the city, or a group of people who were maybe from Spain or France, and that their predilections are maybe slightly different to Americans. What do you think?
Yeah, that's complicated for the operator to deal with because there's the the quality of the guide, and the guide is experienced enough and good enough to recognise that first of all, and then change to suit? Is the group made up of one type of people? Well, you're a bunch of experienced people been to Greece before, but is there someone in that group who's on the first time visiting to Greece? So there's a whole level of different things here. Company policy, you will deliver this tour in this step-by-step manner, no matter what, who's on it. Or certainly when I was running operations, we had a much freer policy where the guides would make decisions about who their customers were, and they would change things to suit the customers. But even then, if the customers were mixed, of mixed ability, of mixed knowledge, it is quite a challenging thing. I mean, a guide who can do that well is an advanced, great guide. So it's a hard one to play with that, and it's like I believe it should be done, but it's hard. It's really hard, and it's nigh near impossible for junior guides or guides who are just starting out.
Yeah.
I don't have such a low estimation of the power of junior guides to do this. I think the problem usually comes through the way in which a guide is onboarded with a company. And I think it usually starts with knowledge and then goes on towards some of these quote unquote more advanced skills, reading the audience. Whereas if you start at day one with your guide, with your new guide, and say every single tour is different, the one thing you need to know is that you do not come into any tour with this set idea of what you're going to deliver. What are the first things you should do? Ask key questions to gain information about the audience, about who you're playing with. Once you have that lay of the land, then then you can develop your playbook. Your skills are like a toolkit that you use with a different nut to crack, a different problem to solve. You have 6 experienced people who have been to Athens all the time and 3 people who have never been to Athens. Let those experienced participants share some things that they've learned over the years. Otherwise, you're going to get that experienced Athenian participant butting in all the time with yes, and did you know, and did you know. This happens all the time, and it's because you haven't given them an outlet to share some of the things that they learned. It might just be like, Anna, you said you've been to Greece before. When was the last time that you were at the Parthenon? You'd be like, oh, it's 20 years ago. I go, has anything changed? I go, probably. And you might say, oh my God, it's so much busier. I say, yeah, the stones haven't really moved much. The people going there, and it's been crazy. Whatever, right? Like you find ways. That's why I think of guide training today should be about learning to make your guide a facilitator and a listener, of a reader of the room, much more than just this information deliverer. Otherwise, you're always going to get that. And it blows me away. I just took a tour in Athens, and 2 of the people in the group had theater backgrounds, and we went to 2 of the foundational sets of stones for the history of theater and music. And another person was a singer. We had a singer and 2 theater people. And here we are listening to a guide deliver basic information about Greek theater and about the history of music. And I was like, oh my God, you have a singer. Get them to sing. It will be the most memorable thing ever for them to belt out a few notes in the first place to ever have like a musical concert. It kills me, right? But that has nothing to do with being advanced or beginner. In fact, it's a much better skill to have with beginner because you have to know less about Aristophanes and about the Odeon. All you have to do is like make the people come alive, make the tour sing literally. Sorry, that was definitely a soapbox moment, but
No, I mean it comes back to connection, right? And that's really what people are looking for. That's what people are drawn to and what they remember most, as per the reviews that I read.
One question that came to my mind was about reviews, because I hear a few people saying, I don't agree with it personally, but I hear a few people saying, it's actually good for you to have 1 or 2 negative reviews because people can see how you respond. If you respond in the right way and it comes across as you're more genuine, because people believe it. If you've maybe not got 100 5-star reviews, but you've got that 1 or 2 that are maybe a little bit less.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything like that with the research that you've done, or is that a total crap? Is that what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah. I love this question. I've got a few thoughts on this. So one, it's impossible to please everyone, and nor should anyone try. And as we know, negative reviews aren't so much, they're just an outlet to complain and to vent about the things that, I expect and that are important to me. And not all negative reviews are made the same. So consider the difference between a the guide had really accented English and it was hard to understand, versus this was a complete waste of time and money. There are much better things to do in the city for less money. I mean, that second review is far more damning, right? And that first piece, honestly, like, I think there are some people who would look at that, me, myself included, because I've read this kind of review before and still booked and been like, that's not a problem for me. Or like, was recently in Southeast Asia and I read a review. It's like, we spent so much time in traffic, not worth it. I'm like, it's Southeast Asia. Like, like that's okay because I know that that's expected. And so I think having some negative reviews doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to deter everyone. You're just going to make sure that it almost allows you to manage expectations beforehand. Second thing it does is to look real, right? I think the complete absence of negative reviews looks extremely suspicious, especially nowadays. Consumers across all industries, by the way, are increasingly wary of fake reviews in the age of AI. And there are some platforms too that allow reviews to be taken down, right? You can request a review to be removed. I've also, and this is not in the tour experience industry, thankfully, but I've also experienced, moments where I've had bad service, or I wasn't happy with the product, and I left a review saying as much. And then the vendor tried to make better. They're like, "I will give you a refund. You send it back, whatever." And then they're like, "Oh, because we sent it back, can you delete your review?" And I think that practice happens more and more frequently. And it just overall makes me a little bit more wary about what I'm reading. And so I don't think negative reviews are always bad. I think they can be extremely helpful, both to help manage expectations and help people make informed decisions. Also, to make the listing, or to show that the listing is authentic. There is, however, a very big difference between my guide was late by 10 minutes and this was the biggest farce I've ever done, and I had to pay extra when I was there, and we didn't go where we said we would.
You mentioned AI, so I'm going to have to jump in with AI because there's some things that tour operators listening to this just have to do, and I've been asking in coaching calls, and so few are doing this. If you have history of reviews and you have a decent number of reviews, just get them all scraped and put them in an AI tool and find out what the customers are really saying, because you tend to glance at them. Don't just stop there. Analyze it, then come up with a list of do actions based on that. Next step, go to your competitor and scrape all of the reviews and run it through AI. Now, some operators have done those things. Most operators haven't. There's another step, the third step. Go to a sector you're not in. If you're an adventure operator, go to a historical operator or a food tour operator and look at their reviews and scrape them and pull points out of them, because there's learning things all across those that you can then re-put into your business and your processes and your guiding that is going to increase and I would put that in as a quarterly exercise. You don't need to do it monthly, but certainly quarterly, you want to be scraping, analysing and changing what you're doing based on, and AI tools have just made that so much easier than gone through step by step by step.
Yeah. I mean, plus 100 to that. GetYourGuide now has an opportunity to synthesize or to analyze reviews at the product level. So that's something that we built. I think it is critical, as you say, to do that for of your competitors too, especially this, and not just the competitors that are doing better than you, right? Also the ones that aren't, so you can avoid pitfalls. And taking it then by extension to other categories. I think there's a lot to learn, and also competitors in other geographies, right? So don't just look, if you're a walking tour in New York, don't just look at other walking tours in New York. Look at walking tours in Bangkok. Why not? Because I think they're like collectively they might be doing something a little bit different that you can borrow. I think that, by the way, as an aside, this is also a really good way to do sort of product development, and to find inspiration for ways to enhance your experience or to find new products to build. by looking at competitors elsewhere, seeing what's flying. I think also off the back of that, Pete, I would say that yes, do this as a quarterly exercise, but then also this comes back to a review strategy. I think the one thing that is absolutely clear to me after having done this report, it's not enough to just think about reviews. It's not enough to just be like, cool, they're important, we'll ask for them. You need to know, if you don't know what your personal review rate is, I would say that's a problem, because then you can't change it. Like, how many people are taking your tours and then how many people are leaving reviews? That is something that all operators should know. What is their star rating across the board and across different platforms? Do you need to focus on any platform in particular? Also, what kind of target do you have for yourself? In what period of time? And can you link that back to the bottom line? So understand what's important for you and take, as you say, action, create action items that you can act on over the quarter in order to meet those targets. And then look at how that has an impact on your bottom line. Reviews impact bottom line. Full stop. There is no if, ands, or buts about it. It is a very, very critical piece of being successful in the experiences industry, which is now largely digitized. Both supply and demand are digitized, right? And so, and reviews are a critical function of commerce online. And that, therefore, to go back to my point, the strategy needs to be specific and actionable and have goals, and you need to understand where you stand as a business.
Brilliant words to end on. Anna, thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom. We will share the report with our audience, and we appreciate having you on the Tourpreneur podcast for the first time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciated the discussion, and look forward to more chats.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Bye.